Welcome to another deep dive into semen retention and spirituality. Today we're discussing a topic that many on the spiritual journey encounter but find extremely challenging: semen retention. If you've practiced or even heard of semen retention, you likely know that it's often spoken about as a key to unlocking higher consciousness, enhancing physical vitality, and building mental clarity. However, despite its immense benefits, semen retention is difficult, remarkably difficult. But why is that? Why do so many people struggle to maintain this practice, even though they believe in its positive effects? In today's video, we'll explore the deeper, often overlooked reasons why semen retention is challenging, examining the complexities beyond just lack of willpower or addiction. This isn't going to be your average conversation about sexual discipline. We're taking it deeper, into the mind, the body, and the spirit. The power of sexual energy, a double-edged sword. Let's start by understanding the sheer magnitude of sexual energy. In most spiritual traditions, sexual energy is regarded as one of the most potent forces within the human body. From Taoism to Tantra, ancient wisdom teaches us that sexual energy is life energy, or qi, or prana, depending on the tradition. It's not something to be squandered, but rather cultivated and directed. The challenge arises because this energy is biologically wired to be expressed physically. Semen retention asks us to redirect this powerful force inward, to channel it towards spiritual or creative pursuits rather than its natural outlet, which is reproduction. This requires a great deal of skill and internal mastery, because you are essentially going against the grain of millions of years of evolutionary programming. The body, hardwired by nature to reproduce, does not easily accept this redirection. Imagine trying to hold back a raging river. Semen retention is like creating a dam within yourself. This dam holds back not only physical energy, but also emotional and mental energy. If the dam is not strong enough, the pressure can become overwhelming, resulting in relapses or intense inner struggles. The physical urge is only part of the challenge. The emotional and psychological waves that come with it are equally formidable. Evolutionary programming, the biological pull. From a biological standpoint, our bodies are designed to reproduce. This is the basic driving force behind many human instincts. Every time you retain semen, you are going against a force that has driven humanity for millennia: procreation. It's not just about the physical act of release. It's about overriding a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. Your body, in its primal intelligence, doesn't know the difference between abstaining for spiritual growth and abstaining because of external circumstances. It sees semen retention as a signal that the opportunity to reproduce is being missed, which can cause a subconscious sense of anxiety, frustration, or even anger. This biological pull, combined with the dopamine-driven society we live in, where sexual images and stimuli are everywhere, makes semen retention one of the most challenging spiritual practices. It's like trying to fast while being constantly surrounded by delicious food. The environment adds an additional layer of difficulty. Psychological attachments and conditioning. Now, let's shift gears from biology to psychology. Sexual release, especially for men, has been conditioned in modern culture as not only natural, but necessary. From adolescence onward, men are often taught to view sexual release as a way to de-stress, feel pleasure, and in some cases, even as a rite of passage. Mainstream culture constantly reinforces this through movies, media, and societal norms, all of which promote the idea that a man who is sexually active and expresses his sexual energy frequently is healthy or normal. When you choose semen retention, you're breaking free from these ingrained psychological patterns. This brings up an internal resistance because, psychologically, you're fighting years of conditioning. Most men have been conditioned to associate masculinity and their very identity with sexual prowess and expression. To detach from that is not just a matter of controlling urges, but redefining what it means to be a man in your own mind. This psychological shift is profound because it requires introspection and reprogramming of the subconscious mind. You're not just abstaining from a physical act, You're reconstructing your relationship with yourself, with sexuality, and with how you express your masculinity. Emotional purging and inner shadows. During the process of semen retention, many people experience what can only be described as emotional purging. This is something that is rarely talked about, yet it is a crucial reason why the practice is difficult. Sexual energy, like all forms of energy, is linked to emotions. When you retain semen, you're not just holding back physical energy, you're also holding back emotional energy. This can bring unresolved issues, traumas, and suppressed emotions to the surface. For many, the act of sexual release is not just physical but also an emotional coping mechanism. It's a way to temporarily escape stress, loneliness, sadness, or frustration. When you remove that outlet, you are left to face those emotions head-on. The difficulty of semen retention is not just in resisting the urge to release but in confronting the emotional baggage that comes with it. This is why semen retention often triggers moments of deep emotional struggle or even crisis. Old wounds, forgotten fears, and unresolved emotional patterns can come rushing to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged and healed. This process can be overwhelming, especially if you aren't prepared for it. It requires emotional maturity, spiritual grounding, and often the guidance of someone who understands the depth of this practice. The role of spiritual growth and ego. Death semen retention is not just a practice of self-discipline. It is a form of spiritual alchemy. In this process, you are transmuting your base desires into higher forms of energy, whether that be mental clarity, creative inspiration, or spiritual insight. However, this transformation is far from easy. Spiritual growth, by its very nature, requires ego death. The ego, which thrives on instant gratification and the pleasures of the material world, is directly challenged by semen retention. The ego does not want to relinquish control. It wants you to give in to your base desires, because that keeps you tied to the material world, where the ego reigns supreme. The difficulty lies in overcoming this internal resistance, the ego's fear of losing its grip on you. Semen retention can feel like an internal battle, where your higher self is in constant struggle with your ego. This is why some practitioners describe periods of semen retention as deeply transformative, but also tumultuous. You're not just withholding sexual energy, you're dismantling the very structures of your ego that thrive on external validation, pleasure, and control. The spiritual significance of semen retention. On a spiritual level, semen retention is often seen as a way to conserve and elevate vital life force energy. Many ancient spiritual traditions view this practice as key to awakening higher states of consciousness, particularly through the activation of the Kundalini energy or the third eye, pineal gland. When the sexual energy is conserved and redirected, it fuels the higher chakras, leading to greater spiritual insight, intuition, and awareness. However, this process of awakening can be destabilizing for those who are not fully prepared. Spiritual awakening is often romanticized, but in truth, it can be uncomfortable, disorienting, and even painful at times. Retaining semen accelerates this process, bringing up deeply buried aspects of yourself that you may not have been ready to face. In this sense, the difficulty of semen retention is not just about resisting physical urges. It's about navigating the profound spiritual transformations that come with it. Your old self, your ego, your lower desires, will resist this change. But that resistance is precisely what makes the journey worthwhile. By facing it, you are stepping into a higher version of yourself. The societal matrix. External distractions. Lastly, let's talk about the external world. We live in a society that bombards us with sexual stimuli. Everywhere you look, from advertisements to social media, there are triggers designed to keep you in a cycle of instant gratification. This is no accident. A distracted mind is easier to control, and a man who is constantly depleting his energy through sexual release is less likely to tap into his full potential, physically, mentally, or spiritually. Semen retention, then, becomes an act of rebellion against this societal matrix. By choosing to conserve your energy, You are actively removing yourself from the cycle of distraction and consumption that modern society thrives on. But this makes the practice even harder. It's one thing to fight an internal battle, but another to resist the constant temptations of the external world. Energy transmutation and the alchemical process. At this point, it's important to touch on the concept of energy transmutation. Semen retention is not just about suppressing or denying sexual urges. It's about redirecting that potent energy into higher forms of expression. This is where the alchemical process of spiritual transformation comes into play. In the spiritual context, sexual energy is raw, primal energy that has the potential to be elevated into creative, intellectual, or spiritual energy. However, this transmutation is not automatic. It requires conscious effort and focused intent. Without a clear channel or a practice to redirect this energy, whether through meditation, creative pursuits, or spiritual work, the built-up energy can become chaotic, leading to frustration, irritability, and even physical discomfort. This is one of the primary reasons why semen retention is so difficult. Simply holding onto sexual energy without actively transforming it can backfire. The pressure builds up and, without proper direction, often leads to relapses or emotional turmoil. This is why many spiritual traditions that promote semen retention, like Taoism or Tantra, also emphasize practices like breathwork, meditation, or yoga to help guide the transmutation process. The difficulty lies in mastering this alchemical process. It requires awareness, discipline, and patience. Energy transmutation is not a one-time effort, it's a daily practice. Each time you feel the sexual urge rising, you have the opportunity to channel it into something higher, whether that's through deepening your meditation, immersing yourself in creative work, or focusing on self-improvement. But doing this consistently is where the real challenge lies. Many people struggle with this because it requires you to stay constantly mindful of your energy and where it's going. The role of meditation and mindfulness. A crucial tool for managing the difficulties of semen retention is meditation. While the practice of semen retention is often seen as a physical discipline, the mental and emotional aspects of it are equally significant. Meditation helps in this regard by giving you a way to observe your thoughts, cravings, and urges without immediately reacting to them. It creates a space between impulse and action. One reason semen retention feels so challenging is because many of us are used to instant gratification. When we experience a sexual urge, we have been conditioned to satisfy it as quickly as possible, often through physical release. Meditation teaches you to sit with those urges, to observe them, and to let them pass without acting on them. This shift in how you deal with urges is key to mastering semen retention. Mindfulness, in particular, plays a significant role. When you're fully present, you can catch urges early before they build up into overwhelming desires. You become aware of the subtle cues your body and mind give you, and instead of being swept away by them, you can choose to redirect that energy. This requires training, of course, and like any other skill, it becomes easier with consistent practice. This is also where the spiritual dimension of semen retention comes into play. In spiritual traditions, mindfulness is often about being in tune with the present moment, the here and now. By staying mindful of your sexual energy, you are staying connected to your spiritual practice. This presence of mind allows you to direct the energy toward your spiritual goals, rather than letting it dissipate through physical release. The Kundalini and ascending energies. Another profound spiritual aspect of semen retention is its connection to the Kundalini energy. In the yogic and tantric traditions, Kundalini is considered the primal energy coiled at the base of the spine, often referred to as the serpent power. When this energy is awakened and begins to rise, it travels through the chakras, purifying and expanding them, ultimately leading to spiritual enlightenment. Semen retention plays a key role in this process because sexual energy is seen as one of the primary fuels for the awakening and ascent of the Kundalini. By conserving and transmuting this energy, practitioners can facilitate the rise of Kundalini, moving it from the lower chakras, associated with physical desires and survival instincts, to the higher chakras, associated with spiritual awareness, intuition, and divine connection. However, this process is not without its challenges. The ascent of Kundalini can be accompanied by intense physical, emotional, and psychological upheavals, often referred to as a Kundalini crisis. This is because as the energy rises, it clears out any blockages or unresolved issues stored in the chakras. The same energy that fuels spiritual growth can also bring latent fears, desires, and traumas to the surface, forcing you to confront them head-on. In this sense, semen retention is not just about discipline, but about preparing yourself for the profound spiritual transformations that come with the awakening of Kundalini. This requires patience and resilience, because the process can be overwhelming. The difficulty lies not only in retaining semen but in navigating the intense spiritual journey that follows. The body-mind-spirit integration. Semen retention, at its core, is an integration of the body, mind, and spirit. Many people approach it purely from a physical standpoint, viewing it as a way to increase stamina, energy levels, and focus. While these benefits are real, the true power of semen retention is unlocked when it is practiced holistically, when you address not just the physical aspect but also the mental and spiritual dimensions. On a physical level, semen retention helps you conserve energy that can be directed toward physical vitality and health. On a mental level, it sharpens your focus and clarity, as the energy that would have been lost is now available for intellectual and creative pursuits. On a spiritual level, semen retention fuels your connection to higher consciousness, providing the energy needed for spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, and self-realization. The difficulty of semen retention lies in maintaining balance across these levels. If you focus too much on the physical aspect, you risk becoming obsessed with the practice itself, turning it into a mere exercise in self-control. If you focus solely on the spiritual dimension, you might neglect the psychological challenges that arise during the process. True mastery of semen retention comes from understanding that it is a practice that integrates all aspects of your being, physical, mental, and spiritual. Relapse and the importance of self-compassion. It's also important to acknowledge that relapses happen, and when they do, they can be discouraging. Many practitioners of semen retention beat themselves up after relapses, seeing them as failures or signs of weakness. However, this mindset is counterproductive and only makes the practice harder in the long run. Relapses are part of the journey. They provide valuable lessons about where your triggers lie, how you deal with urges, and what areas of your life might need more attention or healing. Instead of viewing relapses as failures, see them as opportunities for growth and learning. The difficulty of semen retention is compounded when you approach it with a rigid, perfectionist mindset. This practice requires self-compassion. You are human, and the journey toward mastering your energy is a lifelong one. There will be ups and downs, moments of strength and moments of weakness. What matters is that you keep moving forward, learning from each experience and refining your approach as you go. Self-compassion also extends to how you view the practice itself. Semen retention should not be about denying yourself pleasure or suppressing your natural instincts. Instead, it's about cultivating a deeper understanding of your energy and learning how to use it in ways that align with your highest self. The difficulty lies not in fighting your urges, but in understanding and mastering them, transforming them into fuel for your personal and spiritual growth. Now let's bring all of this together in the conclusion. Semen retention is not just difficult because of biological urges or a lack of self-control. It's difficult because it challenges every aspect of your being, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. You are fighting against evolutionary programming, societal conditioning, psychological attachments, and the forces of the ego, all while navigating a world that constantly tempts you to give in. But remember, every great challenge brings with it great rewards. Semen retention, when practiced with the right understanding and intention, can lead to profound personal and spiritual growth. It's a journey of self-mastery, of rising above the lower desires and stepping into your true potential as a human being. If you're on this path, know that the difficulty is part of the process. Embrace it, learn from it, and use it to fuel your spiritual evolution.